Hey guys, it's Olivia. We're back for another painting class. So if you're back from last time, then welcome back. If you've never taken a class like this before or haven't taken a class like this with me before, then I'm glad that you could join us for the first time. If you were here the last time, we're going to need largely the same supplies that we did the first time. If you're brand new, all you're going to need is a canvas, a cup of water, something to keep water in, a palette. If you don't have one like this, you can use a paper plate, anything that you have lying around that's not going to be absorbent, some paper towels or a rag if you have them, and some brushes. Now, I have a ton of brushes. You definitely don't need that many, but what you want is one larger brush, so it can be as big as something like this, or this one's probably 1.5 inches or 2 inches for your large brush. You want a medium-sized brush. It can be 1 inch, 3/4 inch, it can be round or flat, whatever you have. And then some kind of smaller detail brush. It can be anything in this range. Really just something that's smaller than the other guys that we have. We're not too picky today. You're also going to need some paint. But again, we're not going to be picky with the paint because you can do any colors that you want for this. It's pretty versatile. And so I think that I'm going to do different colors here than I've done here just so I can show you some options that you have. So like I showed you guys last time, this is usually similar to something that I'll get that just has all the primaries. It gives you a black and a white, so you have unlimited options with those colors. I also have a blow dryer here so that I can dry my painting a little bit faster. So if we ever take a break during the video and I say, okay, now's time to dry a little bit, you can take your blow dryer and just hit it really quick, or you can just let it air dry, whatever works for your timeline. And now, because this is not a live class, I'm going to be fast forwarding through some parts that are just going to be me probably painting big areas, or if it's something that I've showed you already, me drying, anything like that, I'm going to kind of skip forward through. So if I go to a part where I'm fast forwarding, that's where you are going to be cued to pause the video, do whatever I'm doing in fast motion, and then you can cue it back up when you're ready to go. It also is a good format because if you feel like you're falling behind or you want more time on a certain part, you can't get it just right, or if you're kind of zooming through and you are way ahead of the game and I'm explaining things that you already know, then you can fast forward through those however you want. So the time is yours. And let's get started here. And so if you've ever taken my class, you know that I do always say if there's any white in the background of our painting, we do want to paint that white. It seems a little redundant, but the finish of your canvas is going to look different whether it has white paint on it or whether it's just the canvas showing through. In this particular painting, I'm going to say you don't have to paint this white edge around if you don't want to. The only difference it's going to have is that if you do paint it, it'll have the same kind of shiny finish that the rest of the painting does. But since it's an element of the background in this specific painting, if the outside of the rim of the painting is matte and the inside is shiny, it's not a big deal because it's kind of acting as a border anyway. So I'm going to leave that up to you guys. I painted the background on mine just because I reused my canvases, so mine's going to look kind of reflective. If you don't want yours to look that way, you don't have to. If you don't paint it at first, you can paint your whole canvas, and then at the end, if you realize like, oh, I really did want to paint that outside part, you can easily go back in and fix it. It's not a hard one to overlap. All right. And so I said I was going to be doing some different colors on this one than I did on the previous one. So I think that I'm going to, instead of doing like a peach and a kind of a deep blue over here, I think I'm going to try a pink and a green. And so last time we kind of talked about contrasting colors and how those are good in paintings like this because then you're going to make one element really stand out from the other elements. And so that's kind of what I tried to do here. I mean, it's loose. It's loosely based on you know, we kind of want to look for those opposites on the color wheel. So over on that side, I kind of did an orange-blue combination. Over here, I'm going to do what would be like a red-green combination, but I'm going to do a really dark green and kind of light pink combination. So I'm just mixing up my pink right here. It's a tiny bit of red, lots of white. If you're wanting to do that kind of peachy color that I did on this canvas, you're just going to go ahead and make an orange, little red, little yellow, and then a ton of white. You don't want this color in the background to dominate what's in the foreground. You kind of want it to be one of those lighter, more pastel-y colors because you want the boots to be dark and you don't want the boots to blend into your background. Alright, so I have something like this. And so we're going to start to paint this rectangle in the background here. And I'm going to say this a million times during this painting, but you can kind of do this exactly how you want to do it. If you don't like such a thick background and you want it to be a little bit closer to the edges, you can certainly do that. If you like the way that border looks and you want to bring this square in rectangle, you want to bring this rectangle in even more so that your flowers and your boots break the edges even more, you can definitely do that. And another thing that I kind of played with the idea of doing is we're just going to start with our rough rectangle. And I painted mine with solid edges, but if you wanted to take your brush with not a lot of paint on it, and if you wanted your edges to look kind of unfinished, like this, and then have the inside painted solid. If you're worried about pulling those perfectly straight lines, you can definitely do something like this, and that'll help you not have to worry about getting a perfectly straight line on every side. You really don't have to worry about that anyway, nobody's perfect. Mine's definitely not perfectly straight. If you wanted to do something like this and leave your edges a little unfinished, it'll look a little painterly. It can be a stylistic choice if you want to do that. If you want to have them completely finished, like a right edge, you can do that. If you want to pause now so that you can fill in your square and take the time to really get those edges straight, you can certainly do that. You don't want to see anybody with a ruler or penciling this in. We're just going to get it as close as we can to a rectangle. If you want to round the edges, you can do that. There are a million things you can do here. Now, people always think I'm lying when I say this for some reason, but if you're having trouble getting your rectangle to be even, it definitely is worth it to take a couple steps back from your painting, go 5-10 feet away from your painting, and from a distance you'll definitely be able to see what side is too short, what side's kind of leaning in. It'll be a lot easier to see than when you're this close trying to do your lines. Another thing that's helpful, if you're going along your edges and you're trying to get a nice smooth edge but you keep getting kind of like a frayed edge there and you want that nice clean crisp line, what I would say to do is, most people's inclination is that, I'll say when you're going down, is to hold the brush like this. And so what that does is it pushes the bristles out and it kind of makes these guys fray out on the side. And so that's going to give you that kind of speckled line. So if you're going down your canvas and you're trying to get a nice clean line, turn your brush the long way here and kind of ride along the side. So you're going to use the skinny side of your brush to make that nice clean edge, and that'll be a lot easier. Also, use enough paint on this part. You want to cover that background. Mine looks like it has a few spots in there, but this is just a solid background. Fill the whole thing in, use enough paint. You don't have to be dragging the paint around and trying to get it into each corner, and it's going to be a lot easier to make the clean, crisp lines if you have more than enough paint on your brush. And we're going to be blow drying after this, so layer it on there. And so I'm going to blow dry now real quick, just this background part. If you did your white edge too, and you need to blow dry in between when you do the white and the color, go ahead and do that. But we're going to come back just completely dry here. So we're going to throw your big brush in the water. We're going to size down to our medium-sized brush. Again, this can be round or flat, whatever you have. And we are going to start to mix up our boot color. And so last time I did kind of that dark blue, it's almost like a peacock green-blue color. I think I'm going to go for a real dark green, which is going to go nice with the pink. I don't have a green, so I'm going to mix my blue and my yellow. Maybe a little bit of black because I do want a pretty dark green, but I'll see. So this is what I have. It probably looks almost black in the video, but it's like a super, super dark green. And the color that you're going for when you're mixing this initial color is going to be what's in this darkest part. And so if you have a color and it looks a little bit too dark right now, you're not really aiming for like this light blue medium shade. We're going to mix up the dark color that you want. So a dark blue, dark green, dark purple, dark red, whatever color you're going to go with. And then we're going to be adding white when we do the boots and the highlights and all that stuff. So what you're going for is this darkest color. So I have this very dark green here. When you brush it onto, it will look a little lighter. It usually does. Okay, so we're dry. Mostly dry. Alright. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do our boots next. We're not going to worry about that bottom kind of rubber sole that has that little bit of a heel there. We're not going to worry about this top part yet. We're just going to make the actual boot shape. And now the boot shape looks pretty easy when you break it down into its parts. If you don't think about the coloring and the highlights and all that, if you just think about the shape of the boot, what you're going to do is, if I gave you a piece of paper and I said, here, you have 5 seconds, draw a sock, and you would probably go straight up at the top. You'd make kind of the leg shape, and then you would make a toe on it, a round toe. That's pretty much exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to forget about this little lip at the top for now. We're not going to do the base. Like I said, we're just going to make the straight down leg part. We're going to come a right angle at the heel, and then we're going to come around to the toe. And we're going to do the same thing with this little one in the back, but we're not going to have to do the whole back part. We're just going to make a little round toe in the front. Yeah, okay. And so we're just starting this to kind of lay down this shape. So you don't need a lot of paint on your brush. We're just kind of outlining right now. And so be careful of how high your boot is going to come, because you do want a good amount of room to have your flowers up here. And so at the bottom, your boot can definitely break the frame of this color that you've painted. Like I did over here, mine only comes out a tiny bit at the bottom, but if you want your boot to come like all the way down here, you can definitely do that. Just remember, we're going to be adding maybe a 1/2 inch of black at the bottom for that sole. But this is just going to be a first pass, so we're just going to lightly lay out what we're going to be doing here. And so I wouldn't bring the top of my boot that far above, I'll say 2/3 of your painting. If you start to go any higher than that, then you kind of start to run out of room at the top. You don't want it to be crowded at the top here. So I'm going to choose around where I think 2/3 is. Maybe here. It's going to be the top of my boot. That's maybe 3 inches long, 4. So the front of my boot is going to be on this side. Back of my boot is going to be on this side. So we're going to drop straight down. As straight as we can. Then when we come across on the bottom, I said it was going to be a right angle, but I lied a little bit. It's going to be tilted down just a little bit on that angle. So when you're coming across the bottom, you're not going to perfectly match the straight across bottom line. You're going to bring it down just a little bit. Okay. And so we're going to come down on this front side as well. We're going to go straight down to maybe, again, maybe 2/3 of the length of this side. And then what we're going to do is we're going to curve it out. So we have a hard angle on this side, a smooth angle on this side. We're going to come out on our toe here, and the toe is going to do one of these kind of smooth edges like we did in the front. Okay, so that is round about the shape that we want. We might have to lower this just a little bit. That's okay. This is just an outline. This is where we're figuring things out. Okay. And so we're going to kind of mirror what we did over here in the back here. And so we have this curve for the toe. We're going to bring it up just above this other toe. We're going to do the same thing for that boot in the back. And you're just mirroring exactly what we did over here. So you're kind of tracing this line a little bit back. You're going to come up a little bit higher than the boot in the front. So this boot in the background is a little bit up to the left than the boot in the front is. Okay. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to fill the whole thing in with our base color. If you see some little spots in it, we're going to do a second coat, so don't worry about it. So just get one layer down. And if you are brushing into your background color here and the colors start to mix and it gets a little bit muddy, I would say take a break, just do the layer just as you put it on. Don't try to blend it or make it smooth that first pass because it won't be very smooth, especially if you're doing a dark color on a light color. You tend to see those little pockets of the lighter color through the back. So the more you brush on it, the more it's going to start to pick up that background color, even if you did dry it. The more you brush over it, the more it's going to kind of blend those two colors together. So we're just doing one really light basic pass to cover the whole inside area that we just did. And so this line on the inside here that you made is going to kind of disappear. We're going to end up with kind of a weird shape. It's going to look like a boot with 2 toes for right now. But we're going to get it back when we do our shading in just a minute. You don't have to worry too much about this bottom line because we're going to be going over it with the black for the sole of the shoe. So don't worry about getting that line at the bottom totally perfect. We'll get it as straight as we can, but we're not going to worry about it. Same thing with these top edges. We're going to get them as straight as we can, but we're not going to worry about it too much. Okay. And I know that most boots don't actually have this, or most rain boots don't. But if you look over here, I have kind of like a little lip on both sides of both of my boots here. I just thought it gave it a little bit of something to add. You certainly don't have to do it if you want to leave your boots straight up like this, like I think most rain boots are. You can leave them like that. I know that some rain boots, some like kids' rain boots, I think, have those little handles on the sides to kind of be able to pull them on. So if you're doing like yellow rain boots, if you want to do those, you can definitely do that. If you do want to do those, you really only would have to do one right here in the front, because with all the flowers in the boots, you really wouldn't see any of the other ones except maybe one right in the front. So if you want to do that, you can certainly do that. If not, then you are here with me. If you want to do the little lip like mine, all you're going to do is you're going to take your brush and you're going to come right at the top of your boot and you're going to stretch it out just a tiny bit. Doesn't have to be a lot. On each side. Do the same on this side. Okay. Okay. Now, if your boot color is very see-through and you can see a lot of your background through it, I would say stop right here, do another coat on your boot, but when you do that second coat, don't blow dry it. We want that second coat to be wet, a little bit wet from the first time. So if yours is like mine and it's pretty dark and you can't really see anything through it, I mean, there are some spots here and there that are a little bit lighter than the other spots. I definitely can't see any of the pink through it, but if some are a little bit lighter than the others, wouldn't worry about it. But we do want that layer to be a little bit wet. If you used a ton of paint and it's very, very wet, I would either just give it a minute or two to get a little bit tacky or blow dry it for 30 seconds maybe. We do want it a little bit wet so that our lighter colors will blend. So we're going to start to do our highlights. And so right now we're only going to be doing, I'll say, our soft highlights, our colored highlights, and so that's going to be these lighter areas that you see in the boot. We're not going to do those bright white highlights until after we do the sole and all that stuff. We're going to let those, we're going to save those till after. And so to do these kind of lighter areas on the boot, I'm going to take my brush, and I'm not going to rinse it. All I'm going to do is kind of wipe off if I have a ton of excess. If you use this brush to mix your paint and to, you know, do everything and it's really full of paint, you can take your towel and kind of just squish a good amount of it off. There's still going to be some in there, but you kind of want that so that your paints will mix smoothly, so that you get it all over your hands. Alright, so what we're going to do, we're going to take just a little bit of white right on that same brush that we used that still has a little bit of that color on it, and we're going to start to put in our highlights. And so we'll start with one that's going to kind of outline this front boot. This one's, I'll say, the hardest one, not that hard. So we're going to come on the front of the boot here. You can kind of see where my first boot started in contrast to where the second boot is. And so we're going to kind of redraw that line that we started with. So we're going to come right on the front of the boot here. We're going to trace up. And again, we're just kind of miming this line on the inside here. Up to this boot. And we're going to blend that in a little bit. And so my paint is already starting to dry, this dark green that I have. So if you feel like it's not blending really well, if you look at mine and you look at that texture, if you start to get kind of this bumpy, not blending, it kind of feels like your brush is dragging on the canvas, take your darker color and you can work back in some of your darker color in there, no problem. Just so that they'll blend smoothly. Alright, so just a little on the front there. We're going to do the same thing on the back side of the boot. We're going to take just a little bit of our white. We're going to kind of skate along that back edge here. And again, you don't want these highlights to be white. You want them to be a lighter shade of whatever base color you're using. We're going to do the white highlights later. We just want to put some highlights in this boot so that you can tell that they are shiny. Those nice rubbery rain boots. And I'm kind of going back and forth between my colors. If I feel like it's too dry, I'll pick up a little bit more of my dark color. If the dark color takes over a little bit too much, then I'll grab my white again. So if you feel like you're doing the highlights and you feel like your brush has just too much paint on it, if it's kind of just all turning muddy and you're not able to get that dark color and the light white, then I would say rinse it, dry it really good. You can start over with a clean brush, no big deal. So we're going to continue with our highlights. We're going to come kind of down the, I'll say, center of the boot here with this little highlight here. So I'm going to start at the top here. It's going to be, I'll say, a soft angle. It's not super harsh. And again, you can see my dark green is starting to dry up here. So I'm going to take a little bit more of my dark. I'm going to use it, I'm going to work it in a little bit here just so that I can blend smoothly. So I'm just going to keep working it until it gets nice and smooth. And now I know when you're doing highlights and things like that, the inclination is to worry about where the light source is coming from and whether it's, kind of an accurate highlight and things like that. And I totally agree. When you are doing a, still life or a painting like that, but for our purposes, I'm going to say creative license is totally okay. We're going to go with what looks right to our eye, which sometimes isn't always what is completely correct in terms of, lighting in real life. And that's okay. You just want to make sure you have some light areas and some dark areas, because that's what's going to make it look like they are reflective. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing, but what we're gonna do is, since we highlighted the front of this boot in the front, we're gonna highlight I'll say the top. We're gonna highlight the top of the boot in the back also. But be careful that your highlight doesn't overtake this whole part of this back boot that's showing, because if your highlight comes in too far, your back boot is going to blend with your front boot. And so you kind of want this edge where they're touching to have one of them be light and one of them be dark. So that way they'll kind of visually separate from each other. So we're only going to highlight the front area of this boot. Again, take your darker color you need to here. I just realized that this is sticking out a little too far. So I'm just going to grab the background pink color that I had. Go right over that. Easy fix. Okay. So again, we're going to take the same brush, a little highlight brush, and we're going to highlight this little lip that we have on our boot if you chose to do that. If you didn't, you can just skip this part. So we're going to come straight across. We're going to kind of outline that little lip that we made. And again, we're going to put a strong white highlight on this, so don't worry too much. This is just a little bit to help you level that line out at the top. Same on the back here. Just a little bit. Okay. Gonna rinse this guy off when you're done with your highlights. Okay. If you want to keep using this, I'll say medium-sized brush, you can do that. If you do have a few brushes to choose from, I would size down to, if you have something between your detail brush size and your medium brush size. So I would say something like this is going to be your detail brush. If you have something in like the 1/2 to 1/4 inch range, it can be round or flat. If you have something like this, I would pick this up. We are going to take some black. We're going to put the soles on there. That's what's really going to make them go from socks to boots, hopefully. Okay. We're going to take our black, and now depending on your canvas size, if you have a smaller canvas, everything that I'm saying is going to be smaller. So if you have a 16 by 20 like I'm using, I would say the soles of your boots are going to be maybe a 1/2 inch. I would start with them smaller than you think you need, and you can always build them bigger. I wouldn't go and put like a big 1-inch sole on the bottom, because then it's black. It's going to be really hard to take that away, especially if you're kind of hovering here around your base between your color and your white background. To have to make that line again, it's going to be a nightmare. So start with it small. If you feel like the bottom of your boots are a little bit big, you can definitely use the black to overlap some of that boot. I feel like mine are a little thick. So I'm going to kind of draw over the bottom part of this boot with the black. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start at the front, and we're going to go, I'll say maybe 3/4 of the way back, and then we're going to stop. Okay, so once you have kind of 3/4 of that sole on there, what you're going to do is when you come to the back, you're going to angle the sole up and to the right. See, so it's not straight up, it's a little bit of an angle, so that we can put our little heel in there. Alright, then your heel is going to drop back down, and you're going to keep going straight across until we get to the back. So if you look right here, we just have a little notch cut out so that we have a sole of the shoe, we have a heel on the shoe. Again, get this line as straight as you can, but don't go crazy. Okay. And you might see a little bit of the sole on the back shoe too. You might see just a little piece of the sole of the back one too. Okay, so when I looked at my boot here, I looked back and I was like, it's a little wide. So all I did was I took my darker color, my darker green, and I kind of just came in and brought that front edge of that boot in a little tighter so that the boot wasn't as wide. You can definitely make changes like that if you feel like we've moved on to the next part and you're looking back and you're like, the shape's not that right. You can definitely pause, take that time to make any changes you need to make. No big deal. Okay, so while our sole is drying a little bit, we're going to move to our highlights. So here you're going to want to take a smaller brush. Again, it can be any shape, anything like this. If it's a flat brush like this or one like this, all you're going to want to do is turn them so that you're using the skinny side of the brush. So there's a lot that you can do here. If you have a round brush like this one, just completely round, you can use this. Usually it's easier just because you don't have to worry about using the correct side of the brush. You can just roll it in your hand however it works. Okay. And so we're going to be starting to put some of our strong white highlights on here. So if you're at this point and you have a lot of really wet paint on here, give it a little blow dry. It doesn't need to be completely dry at this point, but if you have any spots that are super thick or that you feel like aren't going to interfere with the super strong white highlights, because these are the ones that you do want to be white. It's going to be this guy up here in the front, and those are really going to make them shine. So if you feel like your real dark color is going to mix with your white, then hit it with a little blow dry. Mine though is mostly white. Well, I already had paint on my hands, so you can't really tell. But it's dry, I promise. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a little bit of our white, and we're only going to do a few highlights here. It's really just to create a tiny little bit of shine, and you don't need to do them in the same place that I do them. The only thing that I would suggest is that you do them at least on the toe of the shoe, because that's really where you're going to see the highlights. And I would do a little bit at the top here so that you can differentiate a little bit between the front boot and the back boot. If you have any areas like this on mine that's kind of like you don't really know what's going on, use the highlight to separate the two. So I'm probably going to do like I did over here. I'll drop one here. Maybe I'll do one there. You're kind of going to want to stick them on where there are lighter areas. You don't want to stick a super bright highlight in an area where your paint is super dark. That's not going to make a lot of sense. The ones on the toe here, I'm going to make pretty thick. And you're going to do a couple little highlights too on your sole here. And so, like with your color, if the black is really, really wet and you feel like it's going to mess up your highlight, then give it a little blow dry first. If not, and just throw one or two little highlights in there. Alright, we've got boots. And so this is going to pretty much finish up our boots. So if you have any areas, like I said before, that I kind of needed to like fix a shape in here with your background color, and this is definitely the time to do so because we're not really going to be touching the boots from now on. So if you have any little edges to clean up or anything like that, you can take a minute here, feel free to do that. And of course you don't need to do this, but if there's anything that's really glaring at you, then go ahead and fix it. It's a lot easier to fix something once it's dry than when it's wet. Okay, good enough. Alright. And so for the sake of not being wasteful, I have a lot of my colors that I used in those flowers and those leaves. I mixed a lot for some reason, so I'm going to stick with those same colors. I might change the pink a little bit because the pink is really similar to the pink that I have in the background here. But other than that, I'm going to be using all the same colors. And so the colors that you use for the flowers is completely up to you. If you have a limited color palette, if you don't have that many colors, you can use what you have. If you have particular colors that you want to use, you can do that. If you want to do just different shades of one color, like if you want to do pinks and reds and magentas, dark pinks, light pinks, whatever, you can do that. I tried to just choose a variety of colors. I have like a real dark purple, I have a pink, and I have an orange. And then I mixed up 2 greens for my leaves, foliage stems. So I have a darker green and a lighter green, and so the difference between those is not going to be white, it's going to be the amount of yellow that you added. So this green that I have here is going to be more blue, less yellow, and the green that I have over here is going to be much more yellow and only a little bit of blue. So you want one that's kind of like a bright green and then one that's a little bit of a darker grassy green, just to give you a little bit of variety in that green leaves so they don't all look like the same. because there's going to be a lot of them and they're going to be overlapping, so you do want some that are a little darker, some that are a little lighter. You can even use, if you want to give yourself a little bit of yellow or a little bit of white to put into the leaves separately, you can definitely do that. So take this time to mix up your greens and your flower colors, so any colors that you want to use for your flowers from here on. So if you have any small or medium-sized brushes that you've already used that are kind of sitting in your water, you're going to want to clean those, dry them if you want to use them for our flowers. For the leaves, I'm going to mainly be using, I'll say, my medium brush. If you have one that's maybe even a little smaller than this, you can go with that one. So I have my colors here. Mine are all the same, I just mixed kind of a darker pink for my background color. Okay. So we're working with two different greens here, my lighter green and my darker green. And so for most of what I'm going to do, I'm going to use both greens on my brush at the same time. So I have my darker green on one side and my lighter green on the other side. And that way, when I do my brush strokes, you're going to kind of get streaks of both green in there. And so you don't have to worry about these being super smooth or having plain colors in them. If you look close at my leaves in this painting, you can see that they have darker streaks, lighter streaks, yellow, white, kind of a variety of colors. So that's what you want. You can even use, if you have some of your white, some of your orange, yellow, whatever you want. And so the basic shape of the leaves that we're going to be using is going to be kind of a tapered line. And so, just to give you an example, I'll start at the top here. So that's going to be the basic shape of what we're working with, and we're going to kind of adjust that as we go. And so what I did was I took my brush and I started at the peak of the leaf with my brush vertically, so the skinny way. And as I came down to the bottom, I turned it so that when I ended the flower, my brush was horizontal. And so you're going from vertical to when you come down to the bottom, it's going to end horizontal. And that's how you're going to get that tiny top, and it's going to kind of fan out towards the bottom. And so I can make it a little bit wider even. Meet right up with that boot at the bottom there. All right, so we got one leaf here. And so we're basically just going to be doing this over and over. You're going to use your different colors. Some can be mostly light green, some could be mostly dark green. You can use a little white, a little yellow, a little orange, wherever you feel like you want. What I would say is try not to do any straight up and down or straight out to the side. If you look at mine, I have kind of that wobbly edge there, and you want things like that. You want a little bit of irregularity. I'll show you how to do these kind of turn down leaves. You can just do some regular, I just have some kind of eyeball shape, football shape, almond shape, whatever you want to call that shape, leaves, just some simple ones to kind of cover up some stuff in the front here to give it a little bit more fill. So give them all at least a little bit of a curve this way, a little bit of a bent tip, something to give you variety. You want them to end at different levels, so try not to keep pulling all of your leaves from this height. You don't want to make a round little flower arrangement. You want kind of longer pieces sticking out here and there. So I'll show you here. And so I'll show you how to make kind of one of these bent ones here. So I'll come from this side. I'm going to start with my brush wide. I'm going to come up. Let me just get more paint. So I'm going to come up with my brush wide, I'm going to turn it, and then I'm going to come down. And I'll show you a little closer. So I'll start over here. So I'm going to start with my brush on the wide side. I'm going to bring it up. Then I'm going to turn it. I'm going to start with my wide side at the top. And I'm going to come down. So that kind of gives you those bent little leaves. And those are good for the edges because you don't want everything just sticking straight up. If you want to make kind of longer ones that bend at the end, you can definitely do that. Those look nice too. So we are just kind of filling the space here. And they're definitely going to overlap. That's what you want. So don't be afraid if they kind of run into each other. And we can be a little strategic with this too. If you have a spot on your boot that you don't particularly like, throw a leaf right on there. Problem solved. You can make some coming from behind your boot if you want. There's no right or wrong. So a little guy here, little guy back here, if you want. To kind of fill the space. And so you want it to look full, but you don't need to worry about covering the whole thing because we're going to be adding a bunch of flowers. So don't worry if you feel like there's gaps. It's not gonna leave a bare spot because we'll just put something else in there. Okay, I'm going to use this brush again, so I'm going to rinse this guy off. And so you can make any kind of flower that you want to make. If you want to make one that I don't have here, there are a crazy amount of tutorials online, a variety of different people, from real simple flowers to really, really complex ones. So you can make this take as long or as short as you want to. You can get as creative with it as you want. I'm just going to show you a few basic things, real easy guys. If you like one of these more than you like one of the other types, you can do these little kind of like carnation looking guys. If you do those really well and you just like doing those, then you can just do those if you want. If you just want to do a bunch of these little, I don't know, orange sprigs that I have there, if you want to just do them in like a bunch of colors, you can do that. If you don't like a particular flower that I have, don't include it. Whatever works for you. Alright, I'm going to be starting with my, I'll say tulips up here. And so I always think it's better to make these guys kind of two-tone. Again, it's like the grass, it just gives it a little bit of variety. So what I'm going to do is I took my dark purple and my white, and I'm going to put a little bit on each side of the brush. And so we're not going to worry about stems or anything for now, we're going to attach those after. We're only going to pick and choose where we want to put the flowers at this point. And so the tulip starts with your center. It's going to be kind of an eye shape or an almond shape. Again, that kind of pointed oval at both ends is going to be the center of the tulip. And then you're going to make one brush stroke on the outside and one on the other side. And that's going to be your whole flower. It's 4 brush strokes. So I'm going to take my purple and my white. I'll start with one maybe over here. And I'll say the same thing about the flowers that I said about the leaves. Try not to do them just straight up, straight up, straight up. Give them a little bit of lean to one side or the other. All right. So the middle, it's going to start with that football shape. Use a good amount of paint for these. So now I'm going to come on the outside. I'm going to do that same shape again. Pull it towards the middle. And then one more time. Outside. Pull it towards the middle. Right? So you have a tulip. I'll show you one more time. And I can do any kind of colors that I want with these. If I want to add a little pink in there too, you can do that. Let's see. Put one up here. So I'm going to start with that kind of football shaped middle. Right? I'm going to take my 2 colors. I'm going to come here on the left side towards the center. Same brush stroke again on the right side. Curve in towards the center. Alright, so let's do a couple of these. If your leaves are very wet, give it a quick blow dry because we are going to be overlapping a lot of these flowers. If you don't want them to pick up your super dark green, give it a quick dry. But I'm using quite a bit of paint on the brush for these flowers, so I think that even though mine are a little wet still, I think it'll brush over it fine. But if you feel like yours is very, very wet, then definitely take a minute, just hit it with the blow dryer real quick. Or honestly, just wait like a couple minutes and it'll air dry pretty quick. Acrylics are pretty fast drying. Let's see. So I can put one all the way down here too, because we have this front boot that things are coming out of also. So I'm going to come on my left side, my right side. There we go. Let's see. All right, rinse again. Dry again. Oops. Okay. So we're going to go into these, we'll call them carnations. I'm not good at flower types, so if anyone knows what those look like more, then feel free to give me a hint. And so on here I use kind of that light pink, but on this side I'm going to use this kind of darker pink that I mixed up just so you can see it a little bit better against that background. So I'm going to do kind of the same thing that I did with the tulips, and then I'm going to take 2 colors. I took my dark pink and I'm going to take some white. And so what you're going to do with this brush is you're going to take your color side, so my dark pink, and you're going to kind of go in a rainbow shape. You're going to zigzag your brush up and down like this, but this bottom corner of your brush is going to stay in the same spot. You're just going to kind of twist the top of your brush around, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we're going to plant the brush down. You're going to do a little zigzag. See, but your bottom corner of that brush is going to pretty much stay in the same space. You're just moving that top part of your brush around in kind of a rainbow shape, right? And so that's your petal. And so you're just going to keep doing those. You're going to build them up on each other. Alright, and there's your little carnation. If you look over on this painting here. I did kind of a little one that's not quite open all the way, a little bud, I guess. So if you want to do one of those, just make it skinnier. Don't do quite as many petals. Just keep them thin. Let's see. I'll do one here. And you don't have to do just one color of each flower. If you really like this one, you can do a couple different colors of these. Whatever works for you and your canvas. And our last guy here, I'm going to switch to, let's see, I'm going to switch to this round brush that I have, but you could use a little brush like this, you could use a straight brush like this, any kind of, I'll say, small, medium to small size brush. And so the way that I kind of went about these flowers was that I did the bigger flowers first, then the medium-sized flowers, now these skinny flowers. Because what you want to do is you want to be able to place your bigger flowers in areas that you feel like you need to fill in gaps. You kind of want this to look, I'm going to say, generally even, asymmetrical. You just don't want any huge gaps. You don't want all your flowers on one side and nothing on the other side. You don't want all type of one flower on the one side and all another type of flowers on the other side. So what I usually do is I'll do one type of flower, a couple big ones, and then I'll do the medium flower, and then the small flowers, these little orange guys, are gonna fill in areas where I feel like it needs a little bit more, but it doesn't have room for maybe a big flower like this. And it's certainly not the end-all be-all of your painting if you do all of these flowers and then you come in at the end and you're like, you know what, I would really like to do one of these purple flowers over here. You can certainly go back and do that, not a problem. But I just think it's easier to organize your bouquet, I'll say, in this way. But again, whatever works for your canvas. And so again, very same thing. I'm going to take my little brush, I'm going to do some of one color and some of the other color. And now you don't need to do a color and white for all these flowers. I could take this brush and I could do my orange and my pink instead of orange and white, or I could do light purple, dark purple, I could do purple, pink. You can really do any combination of, I would say, a lighter color and a darker color, because you don't want them to blend together. You want them to have a little bit of variety so that you can see the two colors together. I just feel like white makes them stand out a little bit, and I feel like a lot of flowers have at least a little bit of white in them. And so don't feel like you have to stick to exactly what I'm doing. But let's see. And so these are going to be really important that you give these a little bit of movement. So again, not straight up. Bend them a little to the left, a little to the right, whatever you think. But I'm going to... And so the way that you're going to do these guys is you're going to take your brush, you're going to decide where you want to put your base of this flower, and you're going to kind of put your brush down and you're going to pull down towards the center. So you're making a little, I'll almost say a little apostrophe shape. And you're going to keep doing that. You're going to start at the outside, pull to the center. Start at the outside, pull to the center. Get some more paint. So start at the outside, pull to the middle. You're going to go left, right, left, right, left, right. They're going to get smaller and smaller as you go towards the top. Again, make sure you're giving them a little curve. Left, right, until we get to the top. It's going to kind of taper off until you just end with one little piece. And again, try to make these different lengths than you made your leaves to. So maybe I should make this guy a little bit longer so that he really sticks up and, you know, you get a little differentiation there. You can also make these pointed down. I feel like I have one little guy over here. Maybe I'll stick one over here. And so you're going to do just the same thing that you did at the top. You're going to go right, left, right, left, right, left, pulling in towards the center. Right. And this is always the part that I get carried away. I love doing just these little tiny fill-in flowers. So what I would suggest is do one or two, take a step back. If you, like I said before, step back 5 or 10 feet and you will be able to see a lot better where you need something, where you kind of have, you know, where you're heavier on one side or lighter on one side. And it'll be easier to tell where you want to put your next one. Once you step back and you get to a point where you're like, wow, I really like the way that looks, stop. It's really easy, trust me, to overkill with these little fillers, and then you kind of end up, like I said, with that just round top. So it's nice to have little spaces here and there. If you see here, there's space in between where you kind of get glimpses of that background shade. So don't fill it up too much. But if you're having fun, I mean, what can I say? Now I'm going to take, again, if you want to stick with this brush or any of your smaller brushes, you can do that. All we're going to be doing right now is we're going to take one of our greens, doesn't really matter which one, we're going to take a small brush and we're going to be connecting the stems of these flowers that are kind of floating. So just take a good amount of green on your brush, right at the base, and drop it down. And now if you don't like the way that these just connect by sticking right onto the bottom of the flower, what you can do is come underneath here, right where your flower and your stem meet, and you can do kind of the same shape that we did to make these, where it's going to start wide and it's going to kind of taper off. Right, so if you make a couple leaves like that, it's going to kind of give you a wider base, so it doesn't look like it's just sitting on top of the stem like a lollipop. See, but as far as stems on this one, I really only had to do 1, 2, maybe 3. All the other ones are kind of embedded in our stems already, or in our leaves already, so the stems are kind of just a detail. Alright, and that about does it for our rain boots. So, like last time, guys, if you have any questions or anything, leave in the comments. I'll be paying attention when the video goes up on the library website or on their Facebook page. If you need help mixing a certain color, if something is just not coming out right, ask me a question, send me a picture, and I'll try to help as best that I can. I especially want to see if you guys actually do the painting and finish it. I would love to see what you guys came up with, how yours might be different than mine. So I think after the video premieres, I know you can't do it while the video is still running, but once the video goes up on the Facebook page, I think you can leave pictures in the comments. So let me see them. I would love to know what you guys are doing, how you're making these your own, and what this is doing for you. So glad you're all here. If you have any suggestions for next time, please let me know, and we'll see you next time.